Over the years, AAU has become a very polarizing topic in the basketball community. On one side, people say it's the only way college coaches can look at you, and if you don't play, you'll fall behind. While on the other side, people say AAU is a scam and is ruining player development. Both of these are kind of hyperbolic, but is AAU the right choice for young hoopers looking to further their game? In my opinion, that really depends on the player. It could be a great avenue for some and the wrong choice for others. What's going on, guys? It's Coach Eddie with Night Owl Basketball, retired hooper, current coach and basketball skills trainer. Whether you're a player or a parent, I want to make something very clear. This video is not to push you away from or steer you towards AAU. I'm simply going to give you my personal perspective as someone who played from middle school all the way up until senior year of high school before going to play in college, as well as a coach who sees hundreds of players who have played and not played AAU basketball as well. Whether AAU basketball is right for you or your player really depends on the player. So I want to take a minute to first go over who I think AAU is extremely beneficial for, and then afterwards we'll get into the type of players who I think AAU basketball is actually kind of detrimental to their development. So in my opinion, there is three types of players that AAU is extremely perfect for. Player number one is the practice player. We've all seen these type of players. Some of you maybe are that player or have been that player in the past. The player who they play extremely well in practice, but for whatever reason, when they get in the game, they just clam up and they cannot perform. I think AAU is very helpful for this type of player because a lot of it just kind of comes from the big stage. Although AAU basketball and summer basketball is a big thing, I would argue that school ball is still the premier exposure for most basketball players in the world, unless you live in a really small town. More than likely, the crowds will be bigger. There'll be more people in the stands and in the crowds that you know, which in an anxious player's mind leads to more people in the crowd that they can disappoint. These practice players usually have a hard time with feeling like they're letting people down when they're not performing at their best. It's a really detrimental way of thinking that hinders them a lot in games and hinders their overall progression and overall experience in playing basketball. When they get in the games, they don't feel like they can make certain decisions or moves because if they mess up, they feel like they're going to get taken out of the game. So AAU can benefit this player a lot because one, you're going to be under a different coach. Two, that coach is more than likely going to be a little bit more free in their style of play versus school ball, where you may have 10 different play calls and 2 different offensive sets that you have to run and remember every time you come down the court. It's not quite as open for you to just kind of float around and do your thing like AAU promotes. I see these players usually building a lot more confidence when they go play AAU, and they usually end up coming back to their school season a much better player. Now, keep in mind, I'm assuming when I say this that the player is, for the most part, fundamentally sound and has a pretty solid skill set. The next player that I think AAU is great for is that solid role player. They get time on the court. They don't feel uncomfortable playing on the court, but they don't necessarily break out or shine in any specific area. They're just there for one specific role. I tend to find that AAU works out a lot for this type of player because they're allowed a little bit more freedom. They're not stuck in their role. If they're just a defensive player on their mainline team, then they're going to be encouraged to be more aggressive and be more of a scorer and be more of an attacker on their AAU team. A lot of players, especially players who are considered or consider themselves role players, tend to feel a little bit selfish when they take shots that they don't normally get to take. But in my opinion, being aggressive and being selfish are two completely different things. You can be extremely aggressive and be attacking and not necessarily shooting the ball every single time you touch it. But if you have the ability to score, but you don't just because you don't feel like it's your role, then you're not really doing all you can to help your team. So I tend to see a lot of players who are really solid role players go play AAU, then come back to their mainline team and end up being more of an integral part. And they may not take over and be the number 1 or 2 guy or girl, but they're able to be more of an option for their coach. Now, the next player that I think AAU is extremely perfect for is any player who is the star or one of the stars on their team. It's no doubt that most people play AAU for the exposure. And if you live in a smaller town, or maybe your school is not known for producing a lot of players that end up going to college, then AAU could be a good route. It's no doubt that you are going to get more exposure if your team is in larger tournaments, you're traveling to different states. Although a coach may not be going to a game to look at you or your player specifically, if your player is going up against top of the line, top ranked players, then that can cause them to get some eyes. From my perspective on that as well, I was one of the top players in my area, but my area wasn't really known for sending many people off to go to college and play basketball. And if it did, it was pretty small colleges, which, by the way, nothing wrong with the small college route. I took that route. I wouldn't have changed it for the world. But for me, I had the chance and luxury to play against people like Bradley Beal, Ben McLemore. They were both on the same team, believe it or not, and they were pretty nasty. Also, Marcus Smart and a lot of other players who went on to play in the NBA and high-level college. And that was just a really good experience that you might not get just playing at your school. I think it's really beneficial for the star player on their team to go play AAU because it's really good to see if you're actually as good as you think you are, or if you're just a big fish in a small pond type of thing. But with that being said, let's dispel this myth that you can only go to college and play basketball if you go play AAU. That is not the case. None of my official recruitment came from any college from my AAU circuit days, and I played from 7th all the way through 12th, and I had some very big games on some very big stages. The fact of the matter is, unless you're one of the top players in your age group in the entire country, no college coach is looking to recruit you until you're a sophomore in high school. At the end of the day, colleges want to win right now and in the near future. So if you're in the 6th grade, you're not going to be in college for another 7 years. So that doesn't really help them right now. So honestly, there's really one large group of players that I think AAU is just not good for. That group is the underdeveloped player. I've seen so many AAU games from 5th and 6th grade on up to high school who have players who aren't very developed. They can barely dribble with their left hand. They can barely shoot the ball without heaving it up. Their form is terrible. They don't have any handle. They don't know how to make proper reads. Now, I know I'm a trainer, but please do not think this is me saying that you only have to get your kid in with a trainer and then send them to AAU. That's not what I'm saying. You can get better as a player and develop without a trainer. You can do that for free. And there's plenty of videos online to show you how to do just that. The fact of the matter is AAU is extremely expensive. And if we're talking about dollar per reps, like money per rep that you're actually getting playing AAU, if you're a player who's not seeing the floor very much or not seeing the floor at all, it's just not going to be very beneficial for you. Maybe you get a couple touches. How many times are you actually being able to work on your game in those situations? Most AAU teams only practice once, and if they're really good, maybe twice a week, and then they go off and play a 5 or 6 game tournament. So if what you need is actual skill development and you need game experience, but you're only playing 1 to 2 minutes a game and you're not practicing very much, but you're just on the road and traveling and taking up space on the bench, AAU is probably not the best route. If you had the money to hire a trainer or to go to some sort of basketball academy where they incorporate training with gameplay, that would be a lot better bang for your buck if you're a parent. And if you cannot afford that type of stuff, you get a lot more out of your summer looking up YouTube videos, finding a workout that suits your play style, and just drilling that over and over throughout the summer, combining that with pickup play at your local rec center or the park or with a group of friends where you can play without that pressure of a coach, where you can play without that pressure of having to know plays and make plays, and just actually really develop as a player. Don't let people scare you into thinking that you can never go play college ball if you don't go play AAU, because there is another component to playing summer ball. A lot of kids are ending their basketball season and they're only getting 1 week of rest, and they go right into a very long, strenuous summer season. And then they get one more week of rest, and then they go right back into off season for their school team. There's a lot of time in there for burnout, fatigue, and nagging injuries to develop. The body needs rest, and we need more than 2 weeks a year to rest. But anyways, that is just my perspective, my opinion. Do with it what you will. At the end of the day, it's ultimately up to you if you're the player. It's ultimately up to the parent if you're the parent. Make your own decision. Just please make it wisely. But anyway, guys, it's Coach Eddie. This is Night Out Basketball. I hope it was helpful. Hope you got something from it. If you did, leave a like.